One Piece is a story known for its emotional highs. Some of the best moments come in the form of a Straw Hat pirate showing their belief in their captain, Monkey D. Luffy. This is every time the Straw Hats say Luffy will be Pirate King. Ranked. Criteria. Okay, so let's first break down what the criteria of this list is going to be like. There's going to be a few things that I'm going to take into consideration as I rank these. For one, if it's a really iconic One Piece scene that this happens in. Also, the impact that the Luffy will be Pirate King moment has on that scene. We're also going to take into account how much it shows the characters resolve in their belief in Luffy, if it motivates themselves or somebody else, and how memorable the scene is overall. So now that that's out of the way, let's get to it. Vivi, post Enies Lobby. Okay, so at the end of the Enies Lobby arc, pretty much right after the Straw Hats get bombarded with cannonballs from Garp and they escape, we get a look around the world to see some of the people's reaction to the Straw Hats getting these new bounty posters. And so we cut to Alabasta and we see Cobra as well as some other familiar faces taking a look at the bounty posters, and they realize that Miss All Sunday, as she was known in Baroque Works, aka Nico Robin, has now joined the Straw Hats, and they don't know how they're going to break this news to Vivi. So they go and they talk to Vivi, and it turns out that she already knows actually. She doesn't really care too much because ultimately she believes in Luffy, and she knows that he's going to be the future Pirate King. And so her belief in him is basically unwavering, and she knows that even though he's kind of goofy and silly, he has a way of attracting people to him. And if she's going to be on the ship with them, she ultimately believes that the Straw Hats altogether will be able to handle that situation. And if Luffy believes that she should be there, that she should be there. Now, I only put this on this list because I believe that Vivi is a Straw Hat. Not everyone believes that, but because there's some gray area there, I didn't want to put her too high on this list. That's why she's literally at the bottom. But overall, as a moment, this isn't the most memorable moment. It is nice to get her viewpoint on how the Straw Hats have progressed after Alabasta, but beyond that, this is just kind of like a cool little one-off moment. Robin in Wano. Alright, so back in Wano, when the Straw Hats are basically fighting the Toby Roppo, Sanji is caught by Black Maria, and Black Maria makes him call out to Robin, like, "Ooh, Robin, come save me." And Robin pulls up, and she's basically like thankful that Sanji would call on her to come and save him. It makes her feel her usefulness and the belief of Sanji in her, which she really appreciates. So we fast forward a little bit, and Robin and Black Maria are in the midst of their fight, and Black Maria brings up the fact that Sanji basically was heard by everybody on the island, and that he sounded very silly calling out to Nico Robin to come and save him. Robin is actually really happy about the fact that he decided to do that. She understands that Sanji's just an amazing person, and he's a man that's worthy of being called one of the wings of the future Pirate King. So I couldn't really put this too high on this list because, for one, Robin is only kind of indirectly speaking about Luffy being Pirate King here. This is more so about Sanji than it is about Luffy. She obviously understands the magnitude that comes with being one of the wings of the Pirate King, but since it's not Luffy directed, I can only put this so high. Brook, Fishman Island. At the end of the Fishman Island arc, basically the Straw Hats are facing up with the new Fishman pirates. That's Horty Jones and his gang. Brook is fighting this guy, I think his name is Zio or something like that. Whatever, I'll put the real name on the screen. This guy is basically just beating up people that he thinks are human sympathizers, and Brook stops him from beating them up. Zio's like, "Well, all of y'all are gonna die when the Noah drops," and yada yada yada. And Brook's like, "What do you know about death? You don't know nothing about death." Brook knows everything about death because, one, he's a skeleton, yo ho ho, but also he has died. And not only does Brook not have to fear death because of the fact that, he's already been dead and he's a skeleton, yo ho ho, but also because when you're a member of the future Pirate King's crew, there's no reason for you to fear death. I couldn't really put this moment very high. For one, this scene is not memorable at all, really. And the characters, I don't really care about too much. I do care about Brook, but I don't care about the guy he's talking to / fighting here. He is talking Luffy up though, and it's directly about him, so this is where it lands on the list. Brook, Return to Sabaody. So in the Return to Sabaody, basically the Straw Hats are regathering and they're about to meet each other back on Sabaody, the place where they were separated 2 years ago. This is right out of the time skip, obviously. During this time, we get to see each of the Straw Hats making their way back to the island where they're all going to meet up and whatnot. So when we're reintroduced to Brook, we see that he's now the Soul King. And he's having a big ass concert, which is basically like his farewell tour as he's about to go back into the pirate world. And he hypes up Luffy by saying he's the future Pirate King, or the future man that will run the seas. And not only is he alive, but they're about to head off into the new world. This moment is kind of cool, but is it super memorable? Yeah, As far as Luffy will be Pirate King moments, not really. And the scene / chapter is mostly about all the different Straw Hats, and it's not even really focused on this moment too much. So this is about as high as it's getting. Nami, Whole Cake Island. So back in Whole Cake Island, Nami and Luffy are facing off with Cracker, one of the 3 sweet commanders of the Yonko Big Mom. We're already like deep into this fight at this point. Luffy has been fighting Cracker basically the entire night. At some point, Nami realizes that she's able to soften up Cracker's biscuit soldiers by hitting them with rain. Cracker is not too happy about this because Luffy's just been eating all of his biscuit soldiers the entire night. So he's pretty pissed off with Nami and the fact that she was able to figure out this weakness about him. And at this point, Luffy is kind of full as hell. You know, he's just kind of looking like a big ass ball of dough at this point. And he's just really full and he's kind of saying, oh, I don't know, I might be at my limit. Right at this moment, Nami puts her foot down and tells Cracker he might be some Yonko, something or other, commander, whatever, but he's going up against the future Pirate King. And his hunger knows no bounds. And Luffy's like, oh my god, I am kind of full, but I guess I'm just gonna keep eating these things. And it's pretty funny, I can't lie. It is pretty funny. And so this is more of like a funny moment than it is like a hype moment, but it does lead into the final act of this fight and Luffy eventually defeating Cracker along with Nami. So Nami is pivotal to the scene and the fight and all of those things, but this moment itself is a little bit memorable, but it's not like super memorable or iconic in the least. So it's not going to get too much higher than this, but I do like Nami's belief in Luffy here. So that's all well and good. Chopper, Punk Hazard. Back in Punk Hazard, we have these children that are being experimented on by Caesar. He's basically using them to test gigantification and creating giants. They believe that they are sick and that Caesar is actually treating them for their medical illness and that they'll all be able to go home within about a year or so. In this scene, we see that Mocha is running with this candy, and this candy is what Caesar's been using to slowly kill these children and have them be super addicted to this medicine that he's given them. Chopper explains this to Mocha. He tells her that she can't let the other children get this candy. It makes their mind go crazy and they get withdrawals and they just can't live without it, so they become really violent and are just focused on getting the candy. Mocha, believing that she can't allow the other kids to get the candy, eats it herself. And Chopper is really distraught by this, and he basically tells her, no, don't do it. And then we cut back to the flashback of him explaining to her everything that's been going on with Caesar and the fact that he's been lying to them and that they really are never going home, and the fact that the ultimate end for them would just be them dying more than anything else. This really upsets Mocha because she really truly believed that Caesar was helping them and curing them and that they'd be able to go home within just a year's time. This is the moment where Chopper explains that she doesn't have anything to worry about because Luffy is going to be the future Pirate King and he's way stronger than Caesar and he's going to beat him down and everything's going to be okay. And so she swallows her tears and she's basically like, okay, I got to play my role in this and prevent the kids from getting this candy. And she does that, and you know, this moment really hypes her up to do her own sacrifice to help the other children and whatnot. And Chopper shows that he really believes in Luffy and the fact that he's going to take Caesar out. So all of that is really nice. This isn't really like a super iconic or super duper memorable moment to come back to, but when you do watch the Punk Hazard arc or you read it, this moment does stick out in my opinion. Overall, this scene is the culmination of everything that has been leading up with these children prior to in this arc. But the thing is, it is more focused on Mocha than it is really Chopper and him having this exclamation of his belief in Luffy. So that's why I can't really put it too much higher than this on the list. But you know who is getting high? Yep, that's right. It's my subscriber count. Well, not really. 99% of the people watching these videos are not subscribed, so help me out with that and help me reach my goal of reaching 1,000 subs by the end of the year by subbing, letting your voice be known on any of the daily community polls, and liking the video so it can be shared with others who might like it too. Frankie, Post Annie's Lobby. Alright, so back to the Post Annie's Lobby arc. We have Frankie, who is creating the new ship for the Straw Hat Pirates, which is obviously the Thousand Sunny. Iceberg and some of the other Galila shipwrights actually pull up on him and they give Frankie a hand in building the Thousand Sunny. We fast forward a little bit. Luffy is super excited to get this new ship, obviously. So he pulls up and he's like, give me my ship. So here's the thing, it's not Frankie that actually reveals the Thousand Sunny to the Straw Hats, it's actually Iceberg, and it's not Frankie saying in this scene the Pirate King stuff. It's technically Iceberg, but he's basically reading a letter to Luffy, and what he did say was that if Luffy's gonna be the future Pirate King, he's gonna need to ride on the King of Beasts. And so this is obviously a reference to the head on this Thousand Sunny being a lion in Franky's words, even though most people think it's like a flower. I can't put this moment too high on this list just because one, Franky's not even there to say it. This scene is not super memorable because of that moment. It's memorable because of the reveal of the Thousand Sunny, not necessarily because he's saying, oh, you're gonna ride on the King of the Beasts because you're gonna be the Pirate King. So this is where it lands. Sanji, Zoe. So back in the Zoe arc, we see a flashback of Sanji and some of the Straw Hats being confronted by Capone Beige. Capone is basically telling Sanji that he's got an invitation from Big Mom for him to go to a tea party that is actually an arranged marriage between Sanji and her daughter. And basically this is happening because he's actually a Vinsmoke, and so it's more of like a political wedding than anything else, so that she can gain the military power of the Vinsmoke family into her family. Sanji, who doesn't fuck with his family at all, is declining this initially and basically tells Capone that he doesn't really care about this. Luffy has zero interest in joining Big Mom or working under anybody because he's going to be the future Pirate King. Sanji is pretty unwavering in this moment up until the point that Vito, one of Capone's guys, says something in his ear, which I assume is him telling him that they got his mans on watch. Basically, they're talking about Zeph, his father figure, as well as the chefs on Baratier back in the East Blue. He's basically being strong-armed into this position where he can't refuse. He decides to write up a letter for Luffy and explains to Nami that while he didn't want to keep any secrets from them, they should know that he loves the crew and he'll be back one day, but he just has to take care of something. Sanji vows to come back, and it ends with him leaving with Capone. The actual proclamation in this scene is not really the focus of the scene. The reason why I have it this high on the list is because of what it would turn into later on down the road. Because this moment sets up one of the greatest One Piece moments ever, with Sanji meeting up with Luffy again when Luffy comes to Whole Cake Island to come and take Sanji back, and one of the most underrated fights in my opinion in Luffy versus Sanji. Not only that, but the eventual actual rejoining of Sanji and Luffy later on in the Whole Cake Island arc. The payoff for this is better than the payoff for almost every other moment on this list, so I had to put it somewhat high on this list, but I couldn't put it any higher than this because the moment itself of him saying that Luffy will be Pirate King isn't like the main important part of the scene, in my opinion. Franky, Wano. This scene right here starts off with Big Mom seeing Franky and Brook pull up on Onigashima. She's really just focused on Brook, aka the Soul King, because she has some history with him. And Nami is kind of like, oh shit, because she knows what Big Mom's about and what she could do, because Nami was on Whole Cake Island and saw everything that Big Mom was doing and all the running away that they had to do from her. But Franky is having none of that, and he's basically like, Nami, you're embarrassing me because you're forgetting who you are, who we are. We're a part of the future Pirate King's crew. So how the hell are we going to be afraid of Yonko? And he's basically ready to go at her until the numbers pull up and he has to radical beam one of the numbers. Big Mom calls him Iron Man in this moment. That moment is so funny. It does bring everybody's morale up, and Jinbei and Robin work together to get Big Mom the fuck out of there. And it's really great to see how this brings all the Straw Hats together and their belief in Luffy and themselves really because of Luffy, to the point that they don't even care that they have a full-on Yonko in front of them. It was really hard for me to decide whether or not to put this or the Sanji moment above one or the other, but because of the way that this motivates all the people around him and it being the main focus of the scene, I had to put it above the Sanji moment. Nami, Wano. Still on Wano. I know a lot of people really are upset about the fact that Nami and Usopp didn't really put up a real good fight against Ulti in page 1, even though we all wanted to see that. But basically up to that point, they were just getting beat up, and Ulti is basically ready to do the finishing blow on Nami. So Nami's life is basically in Ulti's hands at this point. She already has headbutt Nami one time. She's headbutt Usopp and basically broken his head and nose. And she tells Nami that she needs to say that Luffy will never be the Pirate King. Basically, she's just taunting her at this point. And Usopp in this moment, laying on the ground, dazed and confused, is saying to himself, Nami, please, just say it. It doesn't matter. You don't have to mean it. Just save your life, because her life is literally in Ulti's hands right now. If she doesn't say what Ulti wants her to say, she's about to headbutt her, crack her skull, and that's going to be the end of it for Nami. So Nami begins to speak and she says, Luffy will never, but Nami starts thinking about Luffy and she's like, Luffy will never stop until he becomes the Pirate King. And Ulti is super pissed about this, but it's super cool that Nami puts her full-on belief in Luffy in this moment, and she's willing to throw her life away rather than speak down on him. Yes, the moment that we have on here earlier with Nami, she is going up against the Sweet Commander, but she's with Luffy, and she has Big Mom's Viva card, so she has all the homies, including King Bomb, on her side, helping her and protecting her, where here she's literally at the mercy of Ulti. If she says the wrong thing, she could really just die right there. So this is her really putting her balls to the wall, putting everything on the line for her belief in Luffy. To me, it's a moment that is actually kind of underrated for Wano. As more time goes, people are going to look back at this moment and really see it for how great it is. Because at the time that this chapter was coming out, people were just kind of focused on the fact that Nami and Usopp weren't really doing too much with Page 1 and Ulti, and it was just mostly complaining. The real beauty of this scene is not even about any of that. It's about Nami and her belief in Luffy, which, going all the way back to the Arlong Park arc and the amazing moment that they have between them there, this is another amazing character moment for Nami and Luffy that really shows their relationship and why the Straw Hats have such strong belief in Luffy. Usopp, Alabasta. Okay, so now we got Usopp finally on this list. We're talking about Luffy's best friend here, and he and Chopper are in the midst of a battle with Miss Merry Christmas and Mr. Four of Baroque Works, and they are losing. Mr. Four has been going to work on Usopp. It pretty much looks like he's down for the count, but because they're basically up 20 in the fourth quarter right now, Miss Merry Christmas starts talking shit and is basically like, yeah, your mans ain't on nothing. Luffy's probably dead, to be honest. Crocodile probably took care of him. Mr. Zero is not to be messed with at all. So the chance of Luffy being dead is probably way higher than him being alive right now. Y'all talking about him being the Pirate King is so funny. There's no chance that he'll be the Pirate King. He's not built like that. And this is the moment that Usopp is like, okay, I can't take no more of this. And he says, there's a moment in time where a man has to stand on what he believes in and fight for the people that he cares about. And that's when someone mocks the dream of their friend. And so Usopp is basically like, it doesn't matter that I'm dying here and that y'all are whooping me to high heavens right now. I have to stand up for my mans right here. And he says that Luffy's gonna be the Pirate King and his dream is not to be laughed at. And so they come together and they actually make pretty quick work of Mr. Four and Miss Merry Christmas after that point. This is not just one of these great Luffy will be Pirate King moments, but this is one of Usopp's best moments in the entire series, in my opinion. Usopp, being Luffy's best friend, obviously had to be really high on this list, not only because he's his best friend, but because this moment is just what these moments are meant to be. A Straw Hat understanding that, yeah, I'm in a dire situation right now, but it doesn't matter. You're not going to talk down on Luffy ever in my presence. Jinbei, Whole Cake Island. Back in Whole Cake Island during the climax of the tea party, we're fresh off of a bunch of Luffy's busting out of the wedding cake. Big Mom is pretty distraught about this because literally this entire arc, all she's been talking about is this wedding cake that she's been looking forward to. Seeing it just blow up in front of her really just messed her up real bad. Katakuri manages to figure out which one is the real Luffy and he traps him with his mochi powers, but luckily for Luffy, Jinbei pulls up to the scene and uses his shoulder throw on some tea and is able to free Luffy. Jinbei steps up to Big Mom and tells her that he's thankful for everything, but he's gonna be leaving the Big Mom crew. And Big Mom's like, oh word? Okay then. And she goes to use her Soul Focus on him, which in this moment we learn if the person that she's using Soul Focus on, that she's trying to take their lifespan away, is not afraid of her, then the power doesn't work. Everyone at the tea party is kind of shocked by this. They're like, well, why isn't his lifespan coming out? And then Jinbei gives her some of the best bars, saying, well, here's the thing. If I'm gonna be a part of the future Pirate King's crew, I can't be afraid of a mere Yonko. And boy, yeah. She felt that shit in her soul. That's all I can really say about that. And this is just like a great full circle moment because at the beginning of the arc, he wasn't really able to do this because he was afraid he was going to lose a limb or his head or some of his lifespan or something. But by this point in the arc, his belief in Luffy is just at an all-time high and he understands who he wants to be and be with. Big Mom doesn't understand that Jinbei is just him, okay? And pretty much every time that him and Luffy have like a really iconic moment together, it's peak fiction for One Piece. But as you can see with the last two on this list, as well as the next two that you'll see on this list, when you are literally putting your life on the line to show how much you care about Luffy and your belief in him, that's what's going to get you really high on this list. Because that's the kind of belief that you need to have in him for him to really be able to become the Pirate King. Zoro, Baratie. Okay, so taking it all the way back to the Baratie arc, in the fight between Mihawk and Zoro, obviously Mihawk pulls up, Zoro challenges him. Mihawk makes very, very, very quick work of Zoro with his little freaking toothpick blade and stops Zoro's attack, slashes him with Yoru because Zoro has gained his respect more than anything. And Zoro loses. And while Zoro is down, Mihawk asks Luffy, what is your goal? And Luffy says that he wants to be the Pirate King. And Mihawk basically laughs at this and is like, wow, that goal is even harder than potentially beating me. Which is crazy to say since he basically just one-shot the guy that's been seen as like the second strongest in the series up to that point. And it really sets the distance that not only Zoro's gonna have to go, but Luffy will have to go by the end of the series. Now, we haven't even gotten to the moment yet, but this is just such an iconic scene. I gotta have to lay out what's going on here. As that happens, Zoro lifts his sword up to the sky, declares that he will never lose again because anything less than that will be an embarrassment to Luffy. We get to see Luffy just smiling and being like happy and proud of his right-hand man and Zoro. And Zoro, the part where he's like, is that okay with you, Pirate King? Oh, it's great. I feel like this moment doesn't get talked about really enough, but whenever you go back and you look at this within the Baratie arc, it just shows Zoro's undying will to become the greatest and do it while also helping Luffy reach his goal. Zoro, Thriller Bark. Okay, so now we get to the number one spot on this list. I know, you're like, wasn't Zoro literally just on the list? Well, my man's is iconic, what can I say? So we get to the end of the arc, and the Strawhats just finished beating Moria and Oars. They all came together, everybody's beaten to hell. Another freaking Warlord of the Sea pulls up, it's Bartholomew Kuma. He goes to inspect Luffy's body and is about to take it away or potentially kill him, and Zoro is having none of that, and he hits him with the Shishi Sanson and is like, what the hell is going on? Kuma explains that he's there to take Luffy's head, and Zoro's like, is there anything else we can do? Are you so hell-bent on taking Luffy's head? And Kuma's like, yeah, it's kind of what I gotta do, and I'm not gonna have free will for too much longer either. So Zoro says, you know what, you can take my head instead and just leave my captain alone. This really, really shows Zoro's ultimate resolve. We just talked about in the last part how Zoro said that he wanted to live and become the greatest for Luffy, achieve his goal for Luffy also, but here in this moment he's ready to throw all of that away by taking Luffy's pain on. It's really his resolve and his belief in Luffy that makes this scene so great. Sanji was also up to do the same thing, but Zoro shows his actual love for Sanji in this moment by knocking him out and not allowing him to take Luffy's pain. I don't know if this means per se that Sanji would have died if he tried to do it, but it doesn't really matter at this point because this is Zoro greatness we're talking about right now. And obviously him saying Luffy's going to be the future Pirate King leads into top 5, top 3 One Piece moments of all time. One of the moments that is super iconic in One Piece. It's the nothing happens moment. He takes all of Luffy's pain. The Straw Hats wake up later and Sanji finds him and it's just blood everywhere and he's like, oh my god, what happened? And Zoro says nothing happened, like, oh shit. One of the best moments in all of One Piece, and it's enhanced by the fact that Zoro solidifies his belief in Luffy and him becoming the future Pirate King. So this is more than worthy of being top 1 on this list, and I think that it should be top 1 on your list too, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. Let me know your list down below. Thank you.